Welcome to Down Home Horror, where we keep the hall lights on for you. I'm Alex,
And I'm Amber.
and today we're going to talk about Smile, which seems like a much peppier movie based off that title than it actually is.
But also the way that you said it, like, smile. Like, no. That is not the tone of this.
Well, how about you give us a proper idea of what this movie's about?
All right. So, admittedly, I'm okay to admit this. This is real. This is honest.
This is a safe space.
Yes. I suck at doing synopsises. So, I have trusty old Letterboxd pulled up here with a pretty good idea of what this movie is. So I'm just gonna read it for you. I like their tagline, by the way. Once you see it, it's too late.
Dun, dun,
After
dun.
witnessing a bizarre, traumatic incident involving a patient, Dr. Rose Cotter starts experiencing frightening occurrences that she can't explain. As an overwhelming terror begins to take over her life, Rose must confront her troubling past in order to survive and escape her horrifying new reality.
I remember reading the description and feeling like on it, and then I watched the movie. I guess, yes, technically it describes the movie. I still don't feel like it's necessarily it's missing something. I don't know what it is. They didn't pay me to write it, but it definitely seems like it's missing some kind of oomph that the movie had.
You know what it's missing?
The understatement of the year, the bizarre traumatic experience, understatement.
Yes. This movie is directed by Parker Finn, and this is actually his debut film, which is
Really?
super cool. And I just learned this actually. He had two shorts. One was called The Hide Behind, but the other one was Laura Hasn't Slept, which was actually the seed that was planted for Smile.
Interesting.
And it features obviously Laura, who we see at the beginning of Smile, who is the patient that starts this whole thing with Rose. And they use the same actress, which I absolutely love.
Cool.
And I watched it. I watched the short because I had to. I had to see like what spawned Smile, and I was so fucking uncomfortable. Like I have goosebumps just talking about it. It was
Really? Okay.
creepy. It was really creepy and super cool, and I loved it. Parker Finn premiered it at South by Southwest, and Paramount just happened to see it, and they were like, "Yes, we're gonna take that."
Yes.
Caitlin Stacy is who plays Laura, and through both the short and Smile, she's fucking incredible. Like she portrays terror and like just anxiety and everything so well, and the way that, especially in the short, that her script is written, it just works all really well together to like perfectly get across that these are people that are absolutely terrified of whatever it is that's happening to them that they don't understand. And I just had to bring bring appreciation to that because it's fucking
Sure.
awesome. But
Is that something I
yeah.
can watch on YouTube?
Yes. I'm gonna link it in
Please
the
do.
description because it's really good. Actually, I enjoyed it a lot.
That makes an amount of sense to me, and that now that you say it, I'm like, man, I bet I would have liked Smile if it was shorter. It wasn't like it was terribly long to begin with, but it does feel like a short concept that has been
Right.
stretched out a little bit. And again, not a bad thing. And also, in a way, makes sense that it's his debut film. There's stuff about it that feels like a debut film. So, again, not a bad movie. I'm curious to see what he does next.
Oh, same.
I was really excited to see this movie. I've heard a ton of good things about it, and I watched it, and I feel aggressively medium about it. Kind of where I'm at on it. To have a note, it's textbook horror. You see a bad thing, you're pushed into isolation, so bad thing can get closer to you, while others see it as helpful. Like everything about this was very textbook, which I don't want that to sound like a negative thing. We need our textbook for a formula, but I didn't feel like there was ever a point that I was surprised. I feel like I knew what this movie was throughout it, and again, doesn't make it bad. It just makes it aggressively medium of a movie for me.
I feel like I had a completely different reaction to it. I saw this movie in theaters the first time and I liked all of it until the end. And then watching it the second time, I felt a little less excitement about everything that happens until the end. It's a complete 180. I absolutely loved the ending a hell of a lot more the second time that I watched it than I did the first time, which I thought was really weird. I'm still trying to dissect what that means in my head, but for right now,
time and space, right?
Right. I guess so. For right now, it's just I personally, like, I feel very strong positive things about this movie.
I know I can be kind of persnickety when it comes to stuff. It is one of my. It's an adorable trait. Remember, I'm adorable at all times. I and I hate to give like a criticism. Like it didn't feel like it stood out. It doesn't make it bad. It just doesn't make it stand out.
Right.
I felt like all the plot twists I called. Remember how I was talking about a woman in the house looking through the window, the Kristen Bell nonsense? It's basically the same story in some ways, right? There's an ongoing joke in that show where she keeps dropping casserole pans, right? And how many wine glasses does Connor go through?
Oh my god,
I
her
felt
and her
like
wine glasses.
even make a point to point it out. I'm like, yeah, man, you're pointing it out, but you're also doing nothing with it.
Yeah.
Like it never really comes back up, so it seems like it was really highlighted for no reason. I think the cat reveal was pretty obvious that was going to happen. I guess the ending I called too, but as soon as the ending sequence started and like the phone rang with Joel's number on it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I know exactly how this is going to end. And that bummed me out. I don't like when stuff's too easy to solve because I don't really try to solve the movies when I watch them. I really don't.
Right.
It's gonna sound like a surprise. I do have a great pattern recognition mind though, so it's not always my fault. I did have stuff that I liked about it though. That being said, I think that the scares, the lingering scares, I guess, the background scares were very good. When she's home and to see the patient like in the shadows in the house, like that's good. That was a good scare. You got me there. It is creepy. It is non-intrusive, right? It's not a jump scare by any means, but it's part of the setting, and I really liked that. I think they did a really good atmosphere horror with it.
One of the things that I noted was that it was slightly cliche. Some of the little details in it, but also with the jump scares, a lot of them did the typical build the music up because we're about to throw something in your face that's going to scare you. But they're effective. They worked. Like I was so stressed out throughout the entire time I watched this movie both times. Like I was a chicken shit during this movie.
I was really belittling. That wasn't my intent. It was like I'm glad it had that effect on you. I really am.
But the thing, I get scared super easily. So I pretty much predominantly watch horror things, but I am still the world's biggest weenie. So I don't know, for me and who I am, it was super effective. I can't speak for people who don't get scared very easily. But I did see a couple of things where people who talk about how they don't get scared easily typically had there was a couple of them in there that kind of like
interesting
made them jump a little bit. I think a lot of that had to do with the sound design of seeing it in a theater and how just loud, pure like genuine anxiety when I was watching it. I was not having a great time like mentally watching this movie because of how anxious I was. And again, that might have just been like the super loud noise and everything, but I didn't have as hard of a time watching it the second time, but I was also like in my home and it wasn't as loud, but it was still difficult. So
and I'll give you that. This might have been a movie that was better in theaters for the sound levels, right? They are set for how many different sound channels, and then it gets condensed down to the 5 or 3 or whatever it is that TVs use.
Right.
It's not very many, so I can see it being a better experience in theaters. I am also a baby when it comes to loud noises, so I don't watch my TV too loud if I can help it.
Right.
I usually have subtitles on because it's loud and my ears don't like it.
Right. Same.
Apparently, just I get overstimulated pretty easily with stuff like that.
Me too.
So I'd be curious to watch it purposely listening to it loud or with headphones even, right? I watch a lot of stuff that we watch at home in the living room on the floor writing notes. It's a different experience than what we get to watch in theaters. Yeah. And I have actually noticed the stuff that we talk about that we saw in theaters, I tend to have a lot more positive things to say about for the most part, versus the living room. And I wonder if that's because I'm taking notes, right? And I get
Yeah.
a chance to view it more critically than enjoyment,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's even the same. Like the only movies that we've talked about so far where I'm not in a theater is the Shudder movies. And those I'm obviously like taking notes here and there
Mm-hmm.
for, but because again we talked about this during Renfield, where I feel firstly I feel weird sitting with my phone out in a movie
Right.
theater no matter what. But this is one of the first movies that did come out in a theater that I'm, for the sake of this video, not seeing in
Mm-hmm.
a theater. I feel like because I had that background of seeing it in a theater, I still had that in my brain when watching it the second time. And I will say the sound changes a lot for this for me. Um,
Yeah.
but other than that, like I still love it.
Well, I'm glad, and I know it's like aggressively medium because it's textbook. There's nothing wrong with textbook. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with a classic horror story. They exist for reasons because they're scary, and there's something creepy about this. This is age-old tale, right? Of you getting something attached to you, and it's just getting closer and closer and closer, right? I'm sure there's a few movies we could pull into, like, oh, it reminds us of this.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, Drag Me to Hell was one that came to mind,
Interesting.
and maybe that's because in part I tried watching it twice and also didn't like Drag Me to Hell. But again, just that thing of trying to outrun, trying to outwit this thing that there's no way for you
Right.
to outrun, outwit.
Yeah.
It's always gonna beat you,
It was
right?
very I think we both mentioned this. It follows, but also
Yes.
The Ring. This thing is passed to you and you have X amount of days to get rid of it before you die.
And that is truly scary,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe it's just because I didn't find her story super relatable either. I mentioned it before we started recording, but it's a good joke, so I'm going to say it again. The fact that her childhood scenes were clearly based in the 90s was a personal attack against me. Because at this point, it's saying that I'm a full blown adult where horror movies are reflecting on their childhood in the 90s. No, thank you. I don't
Yeah.
want that.
No.
Passage of time, I'm good. And I also think, again, I enjoy family trauma. Family trauma, check. Mental health, check. This had so much to it that I should have really enjoyed.
Right.
I feel like it almost had too many moving parts, and they had the story with the mom, and I get the purpose for the plot. It also just felt really weak. Like, we needed the house to go to at the end, right? We needed
Right.
her to be fighting something, but for me, it just was not strong enough of a pull to connect that with the thing that was following her. I just think it's apples and oranges. Just because you experience one traumatic event, right, doesn't mean you have to resolve this other one to heal from this first one.
Right.
Uh, and I also just feel like while we had those flashbacks, it still didn't feel prominent enough, right? I did not understand why her mom being sick or having an addiction influenced her now, besides her career. It just felt like there was a disconnect there. Like there's a deleted scene out there that would make it all make a lot more sense to me.
The way that I saw it was not necessarily just the mom's addiction, but
Mhm.
mainly her guilt in choosing not to help her. Because she had the option, she chose to run away from it, which obviously
Yeah.
like ties back at the end when she chooses not to run away from it.
Few things. I feel like if there was a bingo board for our show, thing number one, I would call out that this is a COVID movie. It feels like a COVID movie. It feels like there's a lot of stuff talking about contagion and illness and masks, right? Like there's just a lot to it that I remember the first few months of quarantine looking at my parents and going like, man, we're gonna have some interesting horror coming out after this. And beyond, what was it, Sick, I think, that came out that's clearly about COVID. Uh, but
That was something.
seeing the undertones, I guess, the
Mm-hmm.
themes of a global pandemic of you can't escape it. You're in a health career. Of course, you're going to get this thing. You're going to pass it on to people.
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. Like the theme of like mental health and trauma was so prevalent in my brain that I never even looked past that to see that correlation.
And I could be talking out my ass, right? We could ask Parker Finn. He'd be like, it has nothing to do with COVID. I'm like, okay, well, it's coming at a really interesting time then,
Right.
where I feel like it's easy to connect those dots. Um, what was it that mental illness as a contagious disease? Man, this is a COVID-inspired film. Just this idea that mental illness could be transferred between people.
Right.
Again, cool concept, right? Like, we've seen it with It Follows. We've seen it with Drag Me to Hell. With, I'm sure there's some H.P. Lovecraft story, or I've heard an H.P. Lovecraft similar story before. So it's not like it's a totally original idea. Again, not bad. Just that at the time and place, I'm like, yeah, this feels very COVID-y. So that's bingo board number 1. Has Alex mentioned this is a COVID movie? Mark that square. Guess what we haven't talked about yet, Amber? Color theory.
Oh, yes.
First half of the movie, in particular, blue. Blue is such a common theme. You see Rose wear a lot of blue. You see her office have a lot of blue. The hallways are pink, right? Which was interesting. But we talked about that with Sissy. So if you haven't watched our Shudder Sunday, hey, here's the plug. Please go watch that. Enjoy it. We talk a lot about the color pink over in Sissy. But today we're going to talk about the color blue. I'm using the colorpsychology.org again. I like the site a lot. Positive traits. Apparently, if you're wearing blue, you are confident. Which, as a health professional, she does seem fairly confident in the beginning, right? Thing number 2, she is honest, which is an interesting thing. Is she honest? Is she honest with herself? Is that why she ends up losing the color blue? It doesn't even pertain. Just because it's listed on this website does not mean it's going to apply here. But that is one meaning for blue.
But I also think that that's interesting because of how unhonest she is and how she is, like, again, masking her pain and her actual like fear and just being like, yeah, no, I'm fine. Like, how many times did she say that? Too many.
Right. Working late, having a partner that doesn't support really wanting to know anything that's going on in her life, wants everything to be perfectly perfect the whole time. Our next one is introverted. It's a very analytical color. It's a thoughtful color. So I think we do see that, right? Not necessarily introverted. I mean, yeah, she doesn't really like hanging out with people. She doesn't want to go to her sister's little kid's party. Who would? He's turning, what, 5, 6, some age. That makes for an awful party to go to. That she keeps herself busy at work, so that way she doesn't have to go do stuff. She doesn't really even hang out with her fiance that much, right? I think introverted and isolated color and analytical color makes sense. Other ones, loyal, which I think is interesting. A good listener, a great partner. Like, those are all things that get associated with the color blue. And I think kind of going into dishonesty, and we see that she sheds blue pretty quick after the events happen. She starts wearing a lot of earth tones, right? A lot of darker colors, but blue is very prominent in the beginning. But I think this is also interesting for our negative traits, right? Negative traits can be icy, cold, unfriendly, sensitive. It's a very sensitive color, right? I think of Bubbles from Powerpuff Girls. That she's a sensitive one. Stubborn. It can be used to symbolize stubbornness, anxiety. Oh, hey, look at that. Imagine the same color that's supposed to represent intelligence is also representing your anxiety. What a great overlap, particularly for the beginning of that film. A lack of spontaneity, that's the word, and self-deprecation. So they do a lot of other stuff like blue in nature, blue in fashion, blue in marketing, etc., etc., etc. A lot of blue facts, apparently. But those are our quick facts about the color blue and the symbolism of it, which I think for the most part translates, right? They picked the color for a reason, and I think those reasons stick.
Yeah, speaking of marketing.
Yeah.
2 things about this marketing that I really liked. The first being the trailer, where we talk all the time about how trailers give a lot of the film away, and the rest of the movie that you end up seeing is pretty much a dud. I feel personally that the trailer did not do this movie any favors in a good way. There's a couple of like jump scares in there, obviously, that I thought when I went to go see this, those were going to be the jump scares that I was not looking forward to the most. However, I was very wrong. So I think that they did a really good job with this trailer, making it seem like something that was interesting, but still has like an edge of terror to it without giving too much of what was happening and what was intended to scare you away. The other thing was the whole in-person marketing, where they hired a bunch of actors to sit behind home plate at the baseball games and just sit there and like smile creepily for hours. So
That's
they
cool.
got shown on TV and it got everybody talking about it. A couple of them were actually wearing shirts that said smile. They looked so scary and everybody was talking about it. They did some good old school marketing
I
for
like that.
this and it was really cool to see happen.
It can make or break. There's an art to the marketing.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to just do what everyone does, which is make your trailer, release it, hope some people talk about it, release a second one, release a third one. To do some word of mouth outside, use your marketing budget to do something unique. That's good.
Yeah.
And they had a good film to do that for, right? What are they gonna do for Pope's Exorcist, right? Like, there's not a whole lot of on the floor or on your feet kind of stuff you can do for that. Well, just thinking.
I feel like I would come up with the most like out of pocket shit to promote like something like the Pope's Exorcist.
I do have a question. It's a complaint. It's a question that's a complaint. Why do you think for our credits song they chose Lollipop?
So the creature that we see at the end, the monster, on set they nicknamed it Lollipop. So I don't know if that's the exact reason why, but I imagine because of them nicknaming it Lollipop, they added that, or maybe it was like completely the opposite, in which they had already planned to use this song and then nicknamed it Lollipop.
That makes me happier to at least know what the reason was. Because I'm like, what about this movie lends to Lollipop, Lollipop, can't sing anymore, otherwise we'll get striked. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, I didn't get it, and it made me mad. When I was already lukewarm on the movie, I was like, what the fuck are you guys doing to me? Come on.
Yeah.
Give me at least a reason.
It was
but
an interesting, interesting choice.
Yeah, there was just I can't think of anything. I love that song, right? So I'm like going through the lyrics in my head. I can't think of anything. But if the monster was nicknamed that, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had more to say, particularly like from like a mental health perspective on it. But I just don't have a whole lot of thoughts or notes on it necessarily.
That's why I'm here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? Tell me.
So a few things. One is that we've already kind of talked about like how trauma and mental health related topics are used often in horror films. So again, it's nothing new. However, there was something about the way that they went about this story that in a weird way resonated with me to the point where I was like, I love this. Obviously, we see physical representations of stuff in horror all the time. So this isn't really like defining that type of thing by any means, but I'm a massive sucker for physical representations of stuff that you normally can't see. Obviously you see like the effects that trauma and or grief or whatever the case may be, like you see that those physical effects on other people, but you don't see the actual feeling itself. And there was something about the way that they told the story leading up to the end when it does actually finally physically manifest itself to Rose that I really fucking liked. And I liked the idea of, again, like with putting masks on, where Laura is talking about how it wears a mask, and we think typically of smiles as kindness. In this case, it's literally just the whole idea that, you know, we wear smiles also to mask negative feelings that we have that we don't want other people to know about. And they use a lot of like smile imagery throughout the movie, like the pain chart. Having a smile means you have no pain, right? And then also with right before Rose's nephew's birthday party, you see her sitting in the mirror putting on her makeup, trying to smile through, like make herself feel like she is presentable as a normal quote unquote sane person and whatnot, so nobody else thinks that something is wrong with her. So I liked a lot of the imagery that they used for that. Again, it's not something that's new, especially to this genre, but I appreciated it and liked it a lot.
I like you explaining, you know, the smiles to hide the negative, because yeah, here's this monster. What gets more negative than a monster? I can't be a bad guy, I'm smiling.
Right.
Right? And meanwhile, here's this thing with like its final form, it's like showing all the teeth as it like swallows Rose. Very cool image. But you're right, the idea of the horror isn't just that it's smiling at you, it's that the symbolism of hiding pain behind a smile.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't like about their social commentary on mental health and trauma was how forced it felt when they were using specific characters to say the shitty things they were saying about people that are going through these things. Obviously, it is an unfortunate reality that those are terms used to express what people are going through, but it was to the point in this where it was like, okay, I get it. You know, like it was almost like they were force feeding us, here's what people say about people going through things like this and how shitty it sounds. Like, yeah, it does, but they say it so many fucking times in so many different ways that it's like, yeah, okay, get it now.
Get it.
Yeah.
I felt the same way, particularly with the cops. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get the commentary with the cops.
Right.
Very, very clever. We haven't heard this before, right? Like,
and it was the same with even like her sister and her fiance. My biggest gripe with both of them was that they were both basically doing the same thing. And I thought that that was super unfortunate because we as people are supposed to rely on the people that are closest to us to help us through situations like this and be like our rocks sometimes and be there for us and support us. But the people closest to Rose were first offenders for her. But she has Joel, who is like the complete opposite of her fiance, and she's the complete opposite of herself with Joel than she is her fiance. And I really like their dynamic though. I like the kind of like awkward tension between them because obviously they were what seemed to be a long-term couple, but she leaves him because she's getting too comfortable with him and she's scared of letting him know who she really is and how she feels. Where with her fiance, it's clear that their relationship has worked as long as it has because she is not herself with him, because she can't, she feels like she can't be herself with him. And that's blatantly obvious by what happens when she decides to be herself with him, jackass.
When you're talking about how the people closest to her were the worst offenders, I go back to my thing I said at the very beginning. It was very textbook horror. You needed your main character to be isolated. So then the people closest to her had to be caricatures of people who, because again, that happens, right? That happens every day to people who are going through mental health struggles, of people who are not equipped, even though they are flesh and blood, or, you know, right, like their family, chosen family, that they don't have the tools, the resources, the understanding, the education to help you.
Right.
And they may want to, but they don't know how.
Right.
So like in the case for her sister, like in a way it's, she wants her to just be part of the family. She wants her to have good family experiences. And what do you mean you don't want that? And being really confused, right? Because she's trying to help. The fiance bringing in the therapist, which is crazy that the therapist would do that without consulting the patient, right? That again, it's all this good intent, but no understanding of the real impact. It's intent versus impact. You can have the best intent in the world, but if the impact is poor, then it's not going to have good intent, unfortunately. And but it's a caricature of those moments that people experience in real life. And I agree, they were not subtle. They were not subtle touches. But I don't think this movie was meant to be super subtle.
Right.
And again, that's okay. We don't need every movie to be subtle. I think it accomplished what it wanted to accomplish.
Oh yeah.
When we talked about our last Shudder Sunday with Gwen, right? Like, oh, here is this thing it was going for. Did it make it? Kind of. This, I think, it was like it knew exactly what it was going to be, what it wanted to be, and I think it checks all of its boxes, and it is a solid horror movie for that.
Yeah. There's a couple points about the cinematography that I really want to talk about because I'm kind of obsessed with it. I love the upside down shots. I don't know why, but they just worked so well with what was happening as like transitions. There were a couple points, admittedly, though, that I felt like they were kind of out of place because they kind of like took you out of whatever had just happened before that. In the sense that like it the immersion for what we were supposed to be feeling for the prior scene was just gone because you transition with this like upside down shot and it's gone now. Jillian Zinser who plays Holly, Rose's sister. I saw an interview of her talking about the cinematography in this and how
Mhm.
she said that they wove the camera into the script in a way that like made it its own character. And I just wanted to echo that statement because she said a much better version of what my brain would have liked to say. I
Fair
really
enough.
like the way that she describes that because
Scripted.
I feel like it's pretty accurate. The
Mhm.
camera work is really fucking good. And I also like the fact that none of the smiles in this movie at all were CGI. It was all like natural people.
That's terrifying.
Well,
Holy
maybe not
shit.
natural, but it was all people just
Yeah.
smiling. And I liked how that, for me, kind of plays into the idea that, again, with immersion, Rose doesn't know who's actually smiling at her out of like kindness or just passing, or
Who's
who's,
hallucination?
yeah, what's a hallucination. And the fact that they use so many practical effects in this movie versus
Mhm.
CGI is really cool. Of course, that's, I always have to bring that up. That would be like 1,000% on a bingo board for shit Amber has to bring up.
But I'm so glad, honestly. I feel like we've had a good streak recently of practical effects
Yes.
and them making a comeback. I'm gonna blame Marvel for ruining CGI, right? It just you went too far. You went too far with it, guys, and now here we are. I'm glad that we're getting back to practical effects because I think they are much more immersive and believable in their own way.
There was something I was reading that Parker Finn had brought up, like Marvel's CGI budget and how not a lot of people have Marvel CGI budget. So
Mhm.
it's a completely different like experience as far as that goes. But the monster at the end is completely practical effects. In a Polygon interview, which I will also link in the description if you want to read it, Parker Finn says, I kept wanting to do something that felt like its reveal would be overwhelming and mind breaking. I kept leaning into that and explaining to everyone, I want it to be gleefully evil, so it leans into the feeling of smiling and this evil happiness. He had come up with a design for this basically like really early on. It was just like a quick sketch of something that he wanted it to look like. And then he handed it over to Studio ADI, who created this whole thing themselves. And it
Mhm.
was a 9 foot tall costume with an actor inside of it and puppeteers controlling its limbs, which I thought
Oh,
was
interesting.
badass as shit. And even we talked a little bit about this in Pope's Exorcist with like the stretching of the mouths, like that scene.
Mhm.
They built a rose that had a stretchable mouth so the actor could pull the mouth open and start to put its face
That's
inside of
cool.
it. And I was like,
That's really cool.
I was mind blown by that fact on its own. If I see something like that in a movie and I know or find out later that it's pure practical effects, obviously people use CGI to kind of like hit it home, but when it's predominantly practical effects like that, it's super inspiring for me as a person who wants to do practical effects to know that something like that is within the realm of
Realm.
possibility that you can create by hand to use in a movie. Like that monster for me is what movie magic is, in them creating that as opposed to using CGI for it. There was one last thing, or they kind of go hand in hand, where obviously this entire movie is through the point of view of Rose, until the last part of it, where at that point we are now Joel, right?
Yeah.
So I'm interested because Smile 2 has already been announced. So I'm interested to see if that's where Smile 2 is going to go, with Joel being the person trying to overcome this and what his story is. The only worry I have is obviously that there's going to be no reason that Smile and Smile 2 are separate movies other than it's just a different character as the lead now. Like, I don't want them to do the exact same thing they did with Smile in Smile 2 because
Sure.
I don't want to see the same thing over and over again.
It's funny that you mentioned it. It already has a sequel because I have a note. It so desperately wanted to have a sequel franchise.
Yeah.
Like I'm not surprised with that ending. I'm like, yeah, these nerds want to just make as many of these movies as possible, and I think it'll become classic horror series, right? Where like, God, you're making another one? How can they keep making Freddy's? Like,
Right.
how many Nightmare on Elm Streets can you make? Because it's the same thing over and over again, but like a little different.
Yeah.
I can see this getting the classic series treatment.
Yeah. There was something that someone said, I just gonna mention it briefly. It involves the nephew. That whole scene with the nephew's birthday party sucked. Like not in a like there was this terrible filmmaking kind of sucked, but it was rough to watch from
Well, she hits the door.
yeah, like the gift and just everything about it, like watching Rose actually like express her turmoil in front of multiple people when she literally was trying to hide even just from her sister that there was something wrong. It was really hard to watch that. But someone was mentioned in a YouTube comment that I had seen, but they had said, what if instead of following Joel in the second one, something happens with the nephew? Because her sister like poignantly says he's traumatized now, and this whole thing is talking about trauma, so it'd be interesting to see if maybe like there's something that has to do with that with him, because it's still trauma. Nobody died in front of him, so it's different. But I was like, that's actually a really interesting like thought, like what is going to happen with this, because obviously this monster is spread through trauma.
They'll make a secondary monster that isn't Joel. It'll be a secondary trauma monster that is going to be, I don't know, based off horrible birthday parties, and it'll look like a clown. I don't know.
Imagine.
Like, sorry, I'm being super catty about it. I could see it if they were trying to do something, follow the trauma theme.
Right.
That there's more than one kind of monster in the world. I think that'd be a safe bet to guess. If not the second, then the third.
Right.
We'll do that.
I think that it was funny that you mentioned like how many more Nightmare on Elm Street movies can we make? Because when I think of Nightmare on Elm Street, I think of like sleepover movie. Like Nightmare on Elm Street is never a movie that I put on by myself. It is always like we're gonna hang out, eat junk food and popcorn, and you know, popcorn's not junk food.
It's a fun horror movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I would call it a sleepover classic.
I like that. That's cute.
And I think that Smile is very much going to be a sleepover classic, and that's not a bad thing by any means.
No.
I think for me, this movie has a lot of rewatchability, and it's definitely something that I would share with other people, and I think that for me is what makes it a sleepover classic and a movie that I'm excited to share with other people when they're hanging out with me, and that I'm excited to watch again. And I think that, yeah, sleepover classic for me is probably one of the best ways to describe what I feel like this movie is. And I'm scared of it becoming a series, like a franchise. I think one, maybe, I think I could be okay with, depending on, you know, the direction that they go. But any more than that kind of worries me a little, because for me, Smile is genuine. Like, there's something about it that feels genuine and that, again, like I resonate with, and I'm scared that it's going to lose that quality as it goes on to make more movies.
I think of The Ring, right, where it did so well, and then we Americanized it, and that the Western version did pretty okay. So companies were like, yes, let's make as many of these as possible so we can make as much money as possible. And that's when I think those end up becoming the quote-unquote problem, right? It isn't the directors who are like, I can't wait to make my 10th version of this. Not often, at least.
Right.
It's usually production studios, Hollywood, that's like, we want money. You know what's going to make us money? If we keep pumping these out, because people will keep watching them.
Yeah.
And that's when I get particularly persnickety about any film, right? Tangent being, when they first announced the Marvel 10-year plan, way back when, right? Like, here's our 10-year plan. And I was working at the comic shop at the time, and everyone's like, aren't you excited? I'm like, no, because they are assuming that they're going to make quality enough movies for the next 10 years that people are going to watch them. Or worse yet, they won't care about the quality of movies because people will go see them regardless. And guess what fucking happened?
I'm going to go with option B.
Yeah. And I think that's so insulting to us as consumers to just assume we'll always go to see something. And then if we stop, they'll go, okay, oh well, and there's like no consequence for them, really. Like, that sucks. And just make good content, always and forever.
Yeah.
No other option. Make good content.
Yeah.
It's hard. I get it. It's being a dead horse sometimes with a series, and
Right.
for your sake, I hope they also don't do it.
Yeah. I feel like I'd rather see more original content from Parker Finn than I would multiple continuations of a thought that's already been done. And I'm excited to see more content from him that is original. So hopefully we get some of that.
I'd also say, one would argue, usually when they start doing those spin-off series, right? The director does the first two and then doesn't touch them ever again. They have the information, they got the lore. At least they have enough for a room full of intern writers to do their thing, and they'll pump out another one.
Right.
Like, I would say it's probably likely that he won't stay with Smile forever. He'll do something else. Unfortunately for me, the more I talk about it, the less I like it. Which is, I don't know. Maybe I'm tired. Admittedly, that might be some of it.
Probably.
But I'm finding less and less that I truly like about this movie. But I will die on the hill of just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't think it's good.
Right.
Right. It's becoming less and less my kind of movie. And that's okay. That's okay.
I mean,
we can have different tastes.
We have two people that normally like the same movies or find the same appreciation for something. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because before we started recording, I told my friend who has also seen Smile, I was like, early on when we started doing this, I said, I wonder what that movie is going to be that one of us loves and the other one hates. And I was like, I don't think that it's going to be Smile because I don't think she hates it, but I think that it's going to be the closest that we've gotten thus far. And one of us likes it and one of us doesn't really care for it. So I'm like, I was right. It's not really a good thing. I don't know why I'm celebrating that, but it's nice to be able to see, you know, like two different perspectives of this movie and see, you know, where other people land as far as that goes. Because as much as the horror community can piss me off sometimes with the things that they say about certain things, I also am a person that understands that everybody is entitled to their own opinion. And I think that as long as you are respectful in listening to other people's opinions, but also giving your own, that it's fine. We can coexist in the same freaking community and it's okay. So I've actually had a lot of fun looking at what other people feel about this movie because it's pretty evenly split. Like there are a lot of people that absolutely love it and a lot of people that don't. So it was cool. It's cool to like sit here and talk about it as people on opposite sides of that.
There must just be something that really resonates. And like, I know you've said a few times, like it's really stuck with you, a few of these elements. And there must have just, this is my psychology background coming in. You must have had an event, a series of events, something that makes this resonate with you, right? That's why we like anything. It's because we can relate to something in our lives. And whatever that emotion connection is, I just haven't had in my life. And that's neither good nor bad, right? It's just different life experiences. And that might be the director, writer, Finn may have had that, clearly had that experience. Otherwise, you wouldn't be writing that story. Right. And it's cool that he was able to make a story that people can maybe not relate to, but connects, right? Because that's what you want from a film. You want films that connect with people. And it's interesting. I'd be curious to sit and think about it more and be like, what is it? What is it exactly that I'm missing to really enjoy this experience?
Yeah. One of the biggest things I think is the fact, like going back to the physical representation of something. I'm, like I said, a big sucker for that in a movie because I know, like, I don't have a psychology background, of course, but in my brain, no offense, I do. Like, because I understand my brain better than I know that anyone could ever understand my brain, you know? And I like to think of myself as an articulate person, but when it comes to feelings and emotions, I'm not very good at taking what's in here and saying it out loud in a cohesive and understandable way. So I think that's why I like physical representation so much, because I can see that the writers of these movies understand the feeling, and it's a feeling that everybody has at some point. Like we've all felt, you know, depressed or had a traumatic experience, no matter of what degree is still traumatic. We've all felt grief in one way or another, but we all universally understand that we've all felt that, but we all feel it super differently. But to still have like one representation of that feeling show itself in a way that we're actually able to physically look at, I think is why I like stuff like this so much, because it's like, again, like you said, like a connection. Like I can see that he understands that feeling and is trying to make that connection with so many other people that understand that feeling in a way that, even though we do feel it differently, we still see it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really, really like stuff like this. It, like I said, it resonates.
We like what we like. And so it's funny that you say, like, I have a hard time expressing myself with the emotions, right? I actually have a note here, a therapist with poor communication skills, lol. Because again, there's this idea that if you're a therapist, if you have gone through all the school and if you've done all the stuff, then you should know everything about everything. And there's something kind of scary about someone who's a trained
Right.
professional not being able to talk to people about their own mental illness. Like, that is scary to be a subject matter expert and still not be understood.
Right.
Anyways, I just thought that was funny because I had it in the notes and
Yeah.
I said the thing, and clearly some things hit.
Yeah.
So that's all that we have to say. Let's go ahead and close it out. In the event that you're dodging a smiling demon creature, where can we find you for updates?
You can follow me on Twitter at Amber Blitz, where I post just word vomit about movies that I'm watching, books that I'm reading, etc. Or on Letterboxd, also at Amber Blitz, where I log everything that I watch obsessively.
You can find me on Twitter at Roll4Alex, where I do a lot of tabletop role-playing stuff, but anything else, you can absolutely follow me on Twitter for sure updates about where I'll be, when I'll be. You can also follow me on Twitch at Roll4Alex with a 3 instead of an E. We don't have enough time to talk about it. Don't worry about it. It was taken from me unjustly. Currently, I'm playing a lot of horror games, but that can change. My schedule's wishy-washy, kind of whenever I have the time, so be sure to follow, get the notification when I'm live. Speaking of notifications, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Give that bell a little clickety click. Be sure to comment your thoughts and feelings about Smile. Maybe even put like a little smiley face emoji if you got this far. And be sure to watch our Shudder Sundays. We're releasing those on the bi-weekly, so we have another one coming up soon. Until next time, go ahead and check for monsters under your bed because I can't.
And I won't.
Bye.
Bye.